Hey everybody, it's Brad from Ellicott City Sovac. Once again, I'm here with the B990, the new Bernina top-of-the-line machine, and today we are going to be doing some edge-to-edge quilting in the embroidery hoop. We're going to be using the camera, we're going to be using the giant hoop, we're going to be using the laser, we're going to be using all kinds of new features that let us do this type of thing. I'm going to go step by step. We're going to actually quilt like a mock quilt top. I've got like a big piece of fabric ready to go over there. I'll recommend what foot to use and everything. So the first step is going to be getting our quilt hooped in our giant hoop. So I'm going to go over to the cutting table where I have my quilt top laid out, and I'll meet you over there. Okay, so the main thing about getting your quilt top prepared here is you want to make sure that you have enough batting all the way around. I might not have enough here on the edge. I'm not that worried about it because this is just a piece of fabric here. But ideally you want to have at least 6 inches all the way around the quilt top. Now this, obviously this isn't a quilt top, this is just a piece of fabric. I did a dark colored solid so you'd easily be able to see the stitches and see where the joins are, where I join my individual designs together. And I just, I want to just make it clear to you how important it is to make sure you have enough batting. It makes everything go smoother if you've got plenty of batting all the way around the design here. It's probably a good idea to know the exact dimensions of your quilt top too, so you kind of know how many repeats you're going to need to do it. Although if you miscalculate, it really doesn't matter. I'll show you why when we get to that point. So we get our quilt top ready, and then what we want to do is go ahead and do our first hooping. You're going to always start in a corner. So I'm going to go and do my top left corner. I decided I'm going to start here. So let me grab my giant hoop. So here's my giant hoop, and I'm just going to go ahead and put this in here. And what we want to do is we want to kind of have it so that we've got as much batting above our quilt top in the hoop as we can fit in there. The more you have, kind of the better. So if I look in here, I can see that I really, with the top of the hoop in here, I really don't have that much. I really want to have this. I'm going to move my whole piece down here. I really want to have this more like this. And you see I'm already running into that where part of the top of my batting is not actually in the hoop. Now that's okay. That's fine. The amount that I have is going to be plenty. So this is going to hold this just fine. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the top corner where we have the hoop, we want to make sure that that fits well within our embroidery area. And the way that you do that is with the grid that comes with the hoop. Now there's something about this grid that's unique, and that is that it shows you on it exactly what the embroidery area is based on what foot you are using. So if I have the 26 foot on here, the standard embroidery foot, then there's an outer line that goes all the way around the embroiderable area in the hoop. But that's actually not the foot that I'm going to recommend that you use for this technique. We are actually going to want to use the 44C foot, which I'll show you up close once I get back over to the machine. But that foot has kind of like a much larger footprint than the 26 foot. And that means that the embroiderable area becomes a little bit smaller. And the great thing about this hoop is it actually shows me that. So I can see where the mark is for if I'm using the 44C foot. So my embroiderable area is actually this inner line and then up and around. So you'll definitely want to take that into account when you are doing your hooping, when you're doing your different iterations. We are using a bigger foot to do this than the standard foot. So you want to make sure that, number one, you want to make sure you tell the machine that you're using that foot so that it knows to not let the foot get too close to the inside of this. And you also want to make sure that when you're doing your hoopings, that this is the line that you're following, not the bigger line on the grid there. So that is just something I wanted to point out. I think it's so neat that Bernina included these marks on this on this grid to help you see where your actual embroiderable area is in the hoop, depending on what foot you have on. That is super, super cool. All right, so I'm going to pop my grid out of here because I've got plenty of room. I've got it in there. I've got it fairly straight. I can see that I'm more or less straight. I'm actually a little bit crooked, but that's okay because we're going to be able to rotate our design to make up for the fact that I don't have it perfectly straight in there. Now, if I'm going to be anal about it, yeah, absolutely. You can unhoop it and make it straight, but I'm intentionally going to leave it a little bit crooked so I can show you how to make it straight when it actually sews out. So I'm happy with this hooping, so I'm going to lock my my hoop with the little spinny wheel here. I'm going to take this and bring it over to the machine. Then we're going to talk about the foot that we're going to use. Okay, now the foot that I've chosen to use for this project is the 44C foot. This is the Echo Quilting and Cutwork foot, and the reason that I want to use this is I'm doing an edge-to-edge design, meaning I'm going to go from outside of the fabric onto the fabric. So I'm going from the batting onto my quilt top, and this foot has a little bit of a curved top to the edge of the foot, and that is going to allow it to glide over the edge and not catch on my fabric. Now, if you don't have this foot or you don't want to use this foot, and you want to use the standard 26 foot, I would recommend basting the quilt top to the batting. Just do like a basting stitch all the way around to make sure that the 26 foot can't get caught under there. But you don't need to do that if you have this foot. Now, you may know that Bernina makes the adjustable gliding cup foot number 74, which would be a good foot to use for this. I have found that when using this, the tension just doesn't look right when I'm doing embroidery. So I don't know exactly why that is, but it doesn't. And that's probably why it doesn't come up as a choice in my foot selection on the machine when I go in to tell the machine that I'm using, whatever foot that I'm using. This one is not an option in there. And I think that's just because for whatever reason, the height that this reaches isn't right for doing embroidery. So anyway, you may know, oh, well, why don't you use that one? That's why. It's because it doesn't work as good as this one. And the amount of cup that this has, even though it's not as dramatic as the number 74 foot, it works just fine. I haven't had it catch on my fabric once while I was testing this. You do definitely need to make sure that you go in and tell the machine that it has this foot on here. Otherwise, the machine doesn't know that you're using this, and it would be possible for you to run the foot right into the hoop because it's going to think it has a larger embroidery field than it actually does. So it's very important that you tell the machine that it's using the 44C foot. Don't tell it that it's got the 26 foot on there, because otherwise, when we get to the end, you'll see my magic trick that I do at the end here. When I get to the end, it's not going to work. The foot is going to run into the hoop and maybe break. So very important that you set 44C in the machine before you start. Okay, so I have my hooped quilt on the machine. I am ready to select a long arm quilting design. Now remember, this machine is able to use all format long arm quilting designs. The first machine to come out and be able to read long arm quilting designs at all was the 790 Pro last year, which was only able to read Bernina's long arm quilting designs. But with this machine, I can read all brands of long arm quilting designs. So if I have a long arm of a different brand than Bernina, I can still use those designs. And so I've copied some of my long arm quilting designs that I already had onto my USB drive, and I'm able to go in and read from those. So here, this is a set of designs that I already have, and the one that I want to use is this Field of Flowers. This is made to be an edge-to-edge continuous line embroidery design. When I click on it, it shows me where my start point is, where my stop point is. Basically what I need in a continuous line quilting design is I need it to have a start and stop point that are on the same level, and a design that starts in one spot and continues all the way to the end. And so this design fits the bill. This is going to make a really nice, dense, continuous edge-to-edge design. So I really like this. This is what I'm going to use. Now, let me hide my view menu here. Oh, and by the way, I'm using the mouse. I hope that you can see the mouse moving. I'm using the mouse so that my arms don't get in the way of the camera, so that you can see the screen and I don't have to think about you know, sitting far away from the machine and not getting in the way and everything. So that's why I'm using the mouse. But anyway, I'm going to hide my view menu here. That's going to show me what my current size is. So right now, the width of this is 8 inches by 6.2 inches. Now, when you size up your design, number one, with a long arm design, we can size it any size we want. We can make it tiny, we can make it big. It doesn't matter. It's going to recalculate the stitches perfectly to exactly whatever stitches per inch it's set in the settings. So if I want to see what's that, where's the setting for that? In my settings here under sewing, under embroidery rather, when I go into stitches per inch, customizable quilt designs, I have it set to 10. So that's right here in settings, embroidery, SPI, and you can change your stitches per inch to whatever you want. So if I want more, I could set it to 12. You can set it to whatever you want. Anywhere from 4 to 24, it lets you set that. So anyway, that value will be applied to the line that is the long arm quilting design. So it doesn't matter if I make it tiny, it doesn't matter if I make it huge. So we can size this basically as big as we want. Now, I'm going to caution you from using the entire real estate of your hoop. You don't want to size your design so big that it's impossible to hoop, you know, so that you have to hoop it dead perfect in order for the design to fit in there. You want to give yourself a couple of inches of wiggle room. I recommend like having like a good couple inches. I'm gonna set this so that it is about 9 inches wide, and that's gonna give me plenty of space to work with. Now, if I want, I can also stretch the design. So that time I grabbed a corner node here. If I grab this node, I can stretch the design. So now, yeah, that's going to distort the way the design looks. And if you don't like that, you can not stretch it. Or if you think, well, that's too much stretch, maybe just a little bit less and it's going to look better. So now I've turned this from whatever it was to 9 inches by 9 inches exactly, just kind of by happenstance. I didn't mean to do that, but I'm satisfied with it. All right, so I'm going to have this be 9 inches by 9 inches, and that's what we're going to work with. Now, what we want to do next is we want to add on some positioning markers that we're going to use to line up where the next row of designs are going to be. So the way that we get to our positioning markers for that is in our edit menu, this pencil, and we're going to go and I'm going to hide my edit menu and I'm going to hide my arrange menu because the only one that I need is in position, and I want to choose endless embroidery. I'm going to left click on endless embroidery, and then in here I want to choose to have my guide marks. So this lets me pick where I want them. I don't want to have them in the top, and my preview is updating as I do this. So see, there comes and goes. For this, for my first row, the top row, I only need the bottom marks. So I'm going to leave just the bottom marks and I'm going to hit the check mark here. That's going to add my bottom marks to my design. I want to do that before I actually position the design. Because when you add them, it moves the design a little bit. So you don't want to go and get your perfect positioning and then add those markings in. That's not a good idea. The next step is we're gonna use the camera built into the machine to take a picture of the area so that I can see whether I need to rotate my design or not. And we're gonna do that by going and hitting the view menu here, the top icon. You change from no background, you're going to change that to scanned image. If you already had an image scanned, it would show up right here. And then I don't, so I want to scan my hoop, and I'm going to choose scan hoop. And it's going to say, hey, I'm going to move this hoop, you got to be ready. And I'm going to hit the check mark here. It's going to go ahead and start scanning. So it takes a while for it to scan. I'm not going to make you sit through that. I'll come back when it's done. Okay, and when it's done, this is what we're going to get. We'll have a picture up on the screen that shows us the entire area of what's in the hoop. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit the green check mark, and that's going to go in here. Now notice that I can't see my design. That's because by default a long arm design comes in at a black color, which is not helpful for trying to place it against a dark colored fabric. So we're going to go to our edit menu. Oh, I was already in my edit menu. We're going to go up to edit here, which I minimized earlier. and I'm going to click on colors, and I'm just going to take this color and increase the brightness up until I can see my design. Now, it doesn't matter what color we actually sew this out. I'm doing this color just so that I can see it. I'm going to actually be using pink thread. All right, so now we're going to want to place, well, actually, let's check the rotation of our design. Remember, I hooped this crooked on purpose. So when we go in and bring this up, we can see that this is not straight, okay? So what we're going to do is I can zoom in and see exactly, you know, how far this is. But what I want to do is rotate my design. Now I could grab this little ball here, left click and drag and rotate it like that, okay? And I can just kind of get it to where I think looks good. Or I can go into the edit menu and I can rotate my design by a degree at a time here. Okay, so if I prefer to do it that way, I can, or I can kind of do it visually. Now it doesn't need to be, you know, like laser perfect, right? Nobody's going to be coming and using some sort of laser level to check to make sure that it's 100% straight. And remember, when we're zooming in like this, we're zooming in like 500%. Okay, so you just get it so that it looks pretty good. And then what we want to do is once we have the rotation set, I keep zooming in and out more than I mean to. It's really easier to do it when you're using the tablet for a touch screen. I'm just, like I said, I don't want to get my arms in the way. So, but what we want to do is we want to move the design so that it's kind of up and to the left of where, you know, square would be on the quilt, because we want to have the stitching go on and off of the batting. So I'm just going to kind of, you know, go ahead and make sure that we've got that going on to some extent. Now my start point is going to be out here in the batting, and it's going to go on and off a couple times up here at the top. And so that's how we're going to have this set. And once we have that, what we do next is we are going to hit the stitch out button down here. And when we hit this, we get a brand new screen, brand new to this machine, where we have all kinds of stuff that we can confirm. You know, we can see we've got the presser foot selected here. The key thing here is to have your quilt settings set to on. So I want to have quilt settings on, and what that does a bunch of stuff under the hood. Changes the way that the machine thinks about doing the embroidery design. Instead of tying in the way that an embroidery design ties in, for instance, it puts a quilting tie in, and it changes it so that it can bring up my bobbin thread with a single press and a bunch of other stuff. So you want to make sure that you have that turned on, and then you're just going to hit the check mark. And the first step before we hit start to make it embroider is we actually want to bring up our bobbin thread. So the way you do that is just like you would bring up your bobbin thread any other time. You're going to hold on to your top thread and you're going to touch the needle up down button on the machine. So all I'm doing is holding my top thread and pressing the needle up down button. It's going to go and do a full cycle where it puts the needle down, and then it's going to bring the needle back up, bringing my bobbin thread to the top. And then I want to hold on to that bobbin thread and my top thread, and then I can proceed to have it start stitching. I'm going to go and hit the start button on the machine. It's going to put the foot down and start doing those tie-in stitches. Now, if I want to, I can stop it at this point, pull my top thread out of the foot, and I can either hold this out of the way and then go and bury them if I want to do that. But you really don't need to bury your stitches with this, because it is doing those couple of short stitches at the beginning. It's actually tied in securely, so it is safe to go in and just trim these threads. They're not going to come undone. You know, it's, you know, preference whether you want to do it, pull them to the back or not. But then you're just going to go ahead and hit the green flashing button and proceed to sew out the rest of the design. Okay, so what it's going to do when it gets to the end is it will not cut the thread for us automatically, because it wants us to be able to make that decision if we want to do a thread trim or not. I am going to have it trim now, which will leave a tail here. That's as if we went and cut it. And we'll have to go back and trim those tails later. But what it's going to do after I hit the scissor, so I'm going to hit my scissor key, it goes down and cuts. The next step is for it to actually sew out the first guideline. Now, when it sews these out, these don't get tied in, so it's very possible that one side of them gets pulled out. It's okay. All we need is like a rough approximation pretty much of where exactly it is. So it's okay, don't panic if the stitch pulls out when you do this. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to sew the next piece, which is just a little arrow that it sews out. And then it's going to move to the other side. We're going to tell it to trim. Okay, now I can go back and cut this stitch here that it just left. I can do that at any point. I could do it now, I could do it later. It doesn't really matter. I could go back and trim them whenever. I could take it off the machine and trim them if I want. I'm just going to go ahead and let it do this last one. It goes and sews out my second guideline, moves the machine to over here. I'm going to hit finish embroidering on the screen, and then I hit the scissor key one more time. And now everything's trimmed, and I can take my whole quilt back over to the cutting table, and we're going to re-hoop it and make sure that we get it so that everything's going to fit in my next hooping. All right, so here we are. I am just going to pop my hoop open so that I can reposition the quilt. And so now we're just going to move along here, and what we need to have is we need to make sure that the end, sorry, I'm just adjusting here, that the end of the last iteration is in the embroiderable area. And remember that we have that inner marking that we want to make sure that we stay with. Let me go ahead and put this in here, and let's see. Okay, so that's well within the embroiderable area, and we just want to make sure that I need it to be a little bit further. This can be all the way over here, it looks like, going by my grid. That grid is an invaluable tool for doing this. It really is. I'm so thankful that it works as well as it does. So we put this in. Now I've got it too far to the left, so we need to move it over a little bit. I didn't even need to look at the grid to know that. I'm going to put this in here, and hopefully third time's the charm. Let's see where we are at. Put my grid on it. And okay, that's well within the embroiderable area, and so is the top of it. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and twist to close my hoop, and that's it. We're ready to go on to the next iteration. I'm going to bring this back over to the machine. Okay, so I'm back at the machine. We want to make sure that we hit the edit button on this screen, which we left up, and then that is going to get us back to our design field. Now, I accidentally didn't have the camera running and scanned the hoop. But what you do to get back to that is you click on the view icon here, go up to this icon and click scan hoop again. Let it scan your whole hoop. But once you've done that, you are going to place your design, and first thing we're going to do is check the rotation. And I'm just going to put this up against the top of there, and let's see. We'll go ahead and rotate that a little bit, maybe. That's pretty good. I mean, it doesn't have to be dead perfect. And as long as it's not like really off, then it's going to be fine. But this looks pretty straight to me. Looking at the zoom, and remember, you can zoom really far in. I'm just using the scroll wheel on my mouse here to do this, and I'm using the right mouse button to pan around. If you're using the touchscreen, it's 2 fingers. Of course, I just moved the design instead. 2 fingers to pan around and pinch to zoom in and out. If you're touching the design, then it moves the design around. But what we want to do to get our design placed right, so my scan I was just using to check my rotation. For placement, we want to be a little bit more accurate when we're joining the edge-to-edge segments. We want to be a little bit more accurate than the camera lets us be, so that's where the laser comes into play. What we're going to do is we're going to go and look at where the laser is pointing, and we want the laser to be set to follow our stitch, that our selected stitch is. By default, the first stitch will be what's selected. And what you do to do that is you want to make sure that virtual positioning is turned on here. Okay, that's going to set it so that it moves the laser to the position that the selected stitch is. Okay, now I pretty much always have that turned on, but you want to make sure that that's turned on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the stitch width and stitch length knobs to move our design, and we're going to be looking at the laser to line this up, just because it's more accurate than the camera scan is. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So we can see my red dot right now, and what we're going to do is we're going to move it so that this little teeny tiny pinpoint red dot is dead on where the last stitch was from my previous stitch out. And it is so accurate. It is scary accurate. It's perfect. It places it exactly where that laser is showing, and I love that. I love that it is so accurate. And we don't have to worry about anything else because the start and stop point are on the same level. So we know that as long as we get the start point in the right spot, the stop point is going to be in the right spot. And we already checked our rotation. So this is ready to rock and roll. I can just go ahead and I'm going to hit on my screen the green button. I know you can't see the screen right now, but there's the green stitch out button. The stitch settings come up. I choose all the same stuff. I'm not going to change anything. I hit the green check mark again, and then I can go and bring up my bobbin thread. So I hit my needle up down button. That's going to take a single stitch, bring up my bobbin thread. I'm going to hold both my top thread and my bobbin thread out of the way. Oh, and I know my arm's in the way. I'm going to press the start button. It's going to start stitching. It's dead in the right spot. And off it goes. Now, if I want to, again, I can stop this and trim. Or I could have buried those if I want. And I'm just going to tell it to go ahead and sew out the rest of the design. And that is seamless where that join is. It really, really is. Okay, so here, once again, I'm going to use my scissor. I'm going to have it sew out the next piece, which is, again, the little guide mark. Scissor again. Sew out the guide mark, which is pretty much dead on where the other one was. And then I hit finish embroidering on my screen, and I hit the scissor one more time. Okay, so I could have probably skipped that last placement stitch. I just went ahead and ran it anyway. If you want to skip it, you can. There's really no reason to have two of them in this place right here. And I'm just trimming my thread tails, and I'm going to go ahead and hoop the next hooping. Okay, so I'm back at the machine. I've rehooped, and I've noticed, looking at the back of the first couple of iterations, I've noticed that I don't really like the way that the tension looks on the back. I mean, it's not terrible, but it looks to me like for this particular thread, which is, I just have Mettler 50-weight Metrocene on here, the default tension that it had set the machine to, which was 3, is a little low. Looking at the back of this looks to me like I need to increase my top tension. That's something that I should have checked. I should have tried quilting something with this batting and this thread to see whether it was going to be right or not. I feel like setting my tension up probably around 5 is going to give me a better looking stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We'll check it as we go. But that's just something to keep in mind before you start a project like this. Like if this was like an actual quilt top, I'd be kind of mad if I had jacked up looking stitches on part of my edge to edge. So you always want to run a test and see, you know, with the specific quilt top that you're doing, with the batting, with the thread, you know, what should the tension be set to. It's real easy to go in and adjust it. It is up at the same spot that it is on pretty much all Bernina machines nowadays. Let me move the camera so you can see. I actually already changed it, but it's right here. This is, I'm going to use the mouse. This is my tension button, and what I did was I just grabbed this ball and I moved it up so that that's at 5. I think that's probably going to give me a better looking stitch, so we'll see. Okay, so back on the screen here, we're going to get out of edit. Okay, so let's go ahead and take another picture, and we'll check our rotation, place our design. You see how I have my thread tail hanging down like this? That's not ideal. Generally speaking, you don't want to do that while you're scanning the hoop because it's going to have a ton of little pictures of that thread tail that's bopping around in there. So I'm going to show you where to put your thread when you scan the hoop. I keep forgetting to do this. I did it last time too, and actually in the part where I wasn't recording, I did this explanation, so I guess it's a happy little accident twice that I forgot both times, because this time I get to talk about it. So you see where that thread is just dangling around. It's going to be pictures of that all over the place. It's not going to matter at all for this particular scan, because literally all we're using it for is to check our rotation of our design and make sure that everything is square and that everything looks like it's going to fit in the space that we mean for it to fit into, and all of that stuff. But sometimes it might matter, like if you're trying to you know, place something and you got all these little thread tails everywhere, that could get annoying. But I'll show you what that looks like here in a second when it's done scanning. So I don't know whether you can see this, but I can see these thread tails all over the place in here. When I hit the check mark and zoom in, we can see all these little pictures of the thread hanging out there, right? That's because I didn't hide my thread. And what you can do to hold your thread up out of the way is simply get the thread and bring it up into the cutter on the side of the machine that will cut and hold it. That works perfectly. That's all you got to do. And you know, I forgot to do that the past 2 times that I did this. So at any rate, we are going to go ahead and check our rotation, see how I got this hooped in here. It looks to me like I got it pretty crooked this time, which is fine, because that's why we're doing this, right? We can see that this is off. All I got to do is just grab this ball here and change it until it is straight. I love having a camera where I can actually see on the screen what is happening. So that's great. And then all we got to do now is check for the we have to check for the placement of our start point. And so at some point I managed to click somewhere inside this design other than the start point. So I'm going to zoom in and go in and select that first stitch. That's going to move my needle into the right position. So if that happens to you, you can just zoom in, find that first stitch and click it. Now we can see where how far off the camera shows that it is, and then I'm off by a slightly different amount when I look at the laser. So that's why I'm just going to show you. I'm going to place this design to be where it looks like it's dead perfect using the camera. And then we're going to check that with the laser. Actually, you know what? This looks pretty close this time. I think it really depends on how thick of a batting you have. Here, let me turn the camera. We can take a look. That's actually... Oh, it's trying to focus on the wrong spot and get past here. That's actually pretty darn good. That's pretty darn accurate, really. I'm just going to get a little closer to it and check it. Yeah, it's like a millimeter, like half a millimeter off, so I'm going to adjust it a little bit. That's actually pretty good, though. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that place, and I'm just going to go ahead and start it. So I'm going to hit my my green button here. I am going to tell it to leave all the settings the same. Hit the green button again. I'm going to hold my top thread, hit the needle up, needle down button. That's going to bring up my bobbin thread for me. Whoop, just like that. I'm going to hold my top thread and my bobbin thread out of the way, and I am going to start the design, and off it will go. I'm going to go ahead and stop it here and trim. I did get a little whoopsie doodle here. Not a huge fan of the way that trimming that made a little loop. So what I could do here, so I've got a couple of options here. I could stop and rip out these few stitches, okay? Now I'm not gonna do that because this is just an example, right? But what we could do here is just skip, so I could trim. Now at this point, I would go in, if I was doing a real thing, I would go in and remove these stitches, okay? I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna go and start it over again because when I trimmed it bad and it made kind of a mess up here at the beginning. So if that happens to you, you can skip through your design on the stitch screen here, take out those stitches, those first stitches that I did, and then skip back to the first stitch. So here we are back at stitch number 1, and then I can start over again. I can go ahead and bring my thread to the top again and do the whole thing over again to take care of my little whoopsie doodle there. And go ahead and start, and off it goes. Okay, I'm gonna cut my thread for me here. Yeah, so that doesn't look great where I did that. And actually, now my top tension is too tight. So 5 was too much. I'm gonna put this back down to like around 4 and see what that gets me. So that was my whoopsie doodle, actually was caused by the tension being off. So you really do wanna, like I said, you really do wanna experiment with that so that you get good tension. So now that looks a lot better now. I don't know whether you can see it on the screen here, but that's the kind of thing that really, testing ahead of time really helps. So I do recommend, like I said, to do that. Anyway, so that's, you know, it's good. When you make a mistake, you can show how to fix it. You just go in and you back up. You can pull out those stitches. Remember, the tie out, there was no tie out. So the stitch was not locked at the point when I hit the trim. So it would have been really easy to pull those out. I just, you know, I'm not gonna do that now because I want to get through this video. But in real life, you know, that's what I would have done. So we're gonna let this go and sew out this design, and I'll see you when it's done. Okay, so I have it. So I have it at the end here. We're going to go ahead and trim this one. Now, this time I'm actually going to skip the next one after it puts this guide point in because I really don't need them. I don't need another one over on this side. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a trim and just go and rehoop to the next one. Now, I am just going to go ahead, I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the next couple iterations because I want to skip to the end of this row because the things that I really want to show you, other than what I've shown you so far, is not just repeating the same thing over and over again, but I want to show you what you do when you get to the end and when you have to go down to the next row. All right, so I'm just going to turn the cameras off. I'm going to go ahead and run it until I get to that point, and I'll see you then. Okay, so something entertaining has happened. My power went out for a second, and the machine turned off right after I finished scanning in my next scan. So let's find out if it remembers where it was. We'll find out together because I am not 100% sure whether that is a feature of this machine or not. Oh, and of course I got to take the hoop off when it boots up here. It does. It remembers where I was. That's so great. Okay, so that's excellent. I just wanted to share that with you, that it did that. That is great. And it's my new scan. My new scan is the one that's in there too. So that is pretty cool. It was like right at the end, it had finished scanning and it hadn't gone to the next screen yet, and then the power went out just for like a second and the machine turned off. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So anyway, it turns out that it remembers where I was, so that's great. I don't need to worry that I can't figure out what size I sized my design to. I don't have to redo the endless embroidery marks. That is fantastic. Thank you, Bernina, for making it work that way. I was really mad when the power went out. I was like, what? Anyway, I'm going to finish doing this one, and then the next iteration is the one that's going to be the end point. So I'll see you then. Okay, so first thing, remember how I said it doesn't really matter if you get a little bit off rotation, who's going to notice? It matters if you didn't place your original iteration design far enough into the batting, okay, which I didn't. I only went a little teeny tiny ways in. And then as I got slightly off rotation because I wasn't bothering to like make it 100% perfect, it slowly slid out. And as I got kind of off rotation, it, you know, got worse and worse. So I didn't notice that it was doing that. But the point of this video isn't necessarily how to place your design exactly perfectly for the first iteration. These all line up and are linked together fine. But when you first do the first one, you want to actually have it quite a bit out of the batting so that doesn't happen to you. Okay, now, so as promised, here we are at the other side of the quilt top, and we do not have enough space for another full hooping here. Okay, there's just no way. What am I going to do? Hoop it in like this? You can't. Add batting over here? No. Try to use some kind of sticky stabilizer like a crazy person and get it in there? No, you're not going to do any of that because our Bernina machines are actually able to embroider even if the design we have selected doesn't fit in the hoop. Now, you may already know that because you may have been using Bernina embroidery machines for forever, but you may not know that, which I didn't know that. And when I found that out, I was like, what? Because I thought, well, surely the embroidery machine is going to run right into the hoop if you do that. No, it does not. So check this out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hoop this, right? Just however I can get it kind of as close in there as possible. Okay. And the embroiderable area now does not actually matter that much as long as the beginning is in my embroiderable area, then I'm good to go. All right, so check this out. We're gonna take this, put it back over on the machine, and now we're gonna do something totally crazy. All right, I'm gonna go back to edit here, and I'm just gonna go and hide my background scan. I'm already off rotation anyway, so who cares? So what I want to show you is not that. What I want to show you is I can go and place this design wherever I want, even if it ends up being outside of the embroiderable area of the hoop. So I can go and I'm going to use my laser. I'm not going to zoom in on it. You know what it looks like when I do that. I'm just going to go ahead and place my design. I'm going to place the start point of my design right at the stop point of the last design. And look at this. Look at how crazy this looks. Let me close my edit menu here. We've got like more than half of the design doesn't fit in this hoop. And the machine is telling me that. There's a red border around here. But it turns out that if we just go in here, we hit the green button, we leave all the settings the same. It's saying, hey, you know the design doesn't fit in the design field, right? Yes, I do know, thank you. Now I'm gonna go in and go to the first stitch. Wait a minute, what's going on here? Oh, you know what? I must not have had the first stitch selected. Let me go back to the edit screen. Yeah, so I placed this wrong because I didn't actually have the first stitch selected. Let me go and redo this. It's still gonna not fit in there. Glad I noticed that. That would have been weird if my start point was like all the way up here. So if that happens to you, make sure if it moves over there, that means it's not going to be placed in the right place. So double check that if all of a sudden it looks like it's about to start in the wrong place. So anyway, go back in here. We're going to tell it to go. You know, it doesn't fit. Yeah, I know. And we're going to bring up our bobbin thread. Okay. And this is where it really matters if you told it the right foot. Okay, if we told it the wrong foot, we are breaking the foot right now. So make sure that you have it set to 44C, otherwise you're breaking your foot. All right, but check this out. We go and we've brought my bobbin thread up. We're gonna have it run just like all the other times. Okay, off it goes. I'll reach back here and trim this. Now, once this reaches a part of the hoop where it cannot continue, watch what it does. It's gonna go up here. We got quite a ways to go here, actually, so I'll just speed this up. Okay, so here, it's like, hey, I can't go any further. What do? I say, yeah, okay, just skip to the next part where you can embroider, and it will move the frame to the next position in the design where it can actually embroider. Now, in point of fact, we don't need to continue at this point, because if we look at the quilt top, that whole corner has already been quilted off of the edge, so we don't actually need to continue the embroidery design. But it stopped on its own once it couldn't come back in. And if we needed the rest of this design because it wasn't quite done, we could just hit start here and it will continue. It will just keep going. And it ties in and everything when it does this. So it is like really, really wild to me that this works, that the machine lets me do this. Like, I mean, mind blown. Look, if you have been using Bernina embroidery for years and you already knew this, then good for you. But I didn't know that you could do this. This is so cool. It means that I don't need to count. I don't need to measure. I don't need to know how many iterations I need. It doesn't matter. You just sew them out until you get to the end and you just stop. It's like a revelation that it does that for doing this edge-to-edge technique. I mean, it's just awesome. I like it. And it works on this side, it works on the other side when we get to the other end. So when we're done doing all of our rows, we just do all of them just like this on the last row, and it doesn't matter how long our quilt is, it doesn't matter how tall our design is. We get to do whatever we want pretty much, because it'll just stop like this at the end. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is how to line up our next row so that we don't end up accidentally overlapping the next iteration with this iteration, or like getting it so far out of rotation that it like starts to run into the next, the previous part of the design. So let me show you how that works. We'll do a couple of iterations of that and then I'm done. So I'll meet you back over at the cutting table where I hoop this. I swear, it just blows my mind that that's how that works. Like, it's crazy to me. But okay, doesn't matter. So next thing that we're going to do is we're going to hoop it. And what we want to do this time is we want to make sure that these positioning marks that it's sewed out, these positioning marks need to be in the embroiderable area this time, like right at the top of it. Because we're treating these two marks here as though they were the top of the quilt. And that's what we're going to line up our next iteration with. And ensure that we don't end up running into the quilting at the top here. So all I got to do now is just get this in the hoop. I'm going to check my placement with my awesome grid that comes with the machine. So we go in here, put this in. Let's see whether that is within that 44C line, the way that I have it right now. Okay, yeah, looks like it. Now, the only question is, do I have this too low? And I think I do. My marks are here. I really want to have them more like here, okay? So you want to try to make sure that you get those kind of as north as you can and still have them in the embroiderable area. So I'm going to pop this out of here because I was focusing on keeping them centered here, but really I do want them to be a little bit further up in my hoop, which means I need to have the bottom hoop a little bit lower here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's pretty good, I think. Put this in here. Yep, that's in the embroiderable area, and we'll be ready to rock and roll here in a second. I am just going to twist my hoop lock. I really love that hoop. I love the way that those twist lock hoops work. Again, that's like, you know, if you've been doing Berninas for a million years, it's like, well, yeah, duh. But I haven't. So anyway, we've got this on here. We got it nice and tight, and I'm going to bring this back over to my machine. Okay, and so we're back. Now, the first thing we're going to do, scan our hoop so that we can see where those positioning marks are. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Go back out of edit, and it doesn't really matter that my design is placed all the way out here. It just, for neatness sake, I'm going to put it back in, and then you click on the scan hoop icon, scan image, scan hoop, and it starts scanning. And as you can see, oh, I don't have my hoop snapped in all the way. So that gives me a little bit of respite because it will allow me to move my thread out of the way, which I had forgotten to do. Just make sure that the quilt isn't underneath of there. We say, yep. It's going to go ahead and start scanning. See you when it's done. Okay, so my scan's done. Just got to wait for it to load up here. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and hit the check mark. And now I am going to do something. I'm going to do something with this design before I go and do the placement, because I need some additional placement marks. And to get them, I want to get rid of my old placement marks. So if we look in our layers here, the second layer, this is the positioning marks. We're going to get rid of them. I'm going to left click, or you could just finger press and hold and drag to the left and get rid of them. Then I'm going to take this and set the rotation to 0. So we're going to set this to 0 degrees so that it's straight. Then we're going to redo the endless embroidery marks. So we go in here, we go down to endless embroidery, and this time I want the 4 corners, okay? And we're going to just hit the check mark. So that's added some new marks. These marks are the ones that we're going to use to line up with the old marks, and then it will also put in a new set for the next row, okay? So what we're going to do is zoom in, and I am going to place the arrows so that they are pointing at each other. And what we want to see is we want to see them so that that's basically touching the other one. And then let's go look at the other side, and we can see that our rotation is off. So we're going to need to rotate this in order for these guys to both be pointing at one another. And that is the name of the game. That's why we did this. So we're going to go in and let's rotate this by a degree, maybe a couple degrees. And then I'm going to go and readjust where I'm at. So I'm going to now move it so that this one is touching. Okay. And then let's go and check on the other side. And they are not quite touching, but they're close. So let's do one less degree of rotation. Place it so that he is touching that one. Okay. And it's still not quite perfect, so let's see what we can do here. Give it another degree. Yeah, you know, what would really be nice is if I had a finer control over how many degrees I can rotate it. I'm hopeful that that'll come out at some point. But we'll just get this so that it's as close as it can get. As long as we're pretty close, I mean, we can see whether we're going to run into the previous stitching there. As long as we're pretty close, I'm satisfied with it. So that's good enough for me. And now we're going to just go ahead and sew it out, because we don't need to join anything. Because this is the first iteration of this row. So same as the last times, we're going to go and hit the stitch out. We're going to hit the needle up, needle down to pull up our bobbin thread. And there we go. So you see how we can use those positioning marks that were there as a guide to get us close to the rotation. Again, it doesn't need to be 100% perfect. Nobody's going to be like pulling out the calipers and checking you. You just want to make sure you're not going to overlap. All right, so we're going to go in and just go ahead and get it started. Okay, so once we get to here, we can trim. Now, we don't actually need to sew out the top embroidery marks. Those were there just for us to place the design, so there's no reason to actually sew those out. And what I'm going to do, oh, I got a bunch of fuzz in here, and I didn't trim that thread tail very well. That's okay. This is just an example. But so what I'm going to do is on my screen here, I'm just going to go and skip 2 and 3, which is the second and third color change, and go straight to 4. Which is going to be the bottom ones. And those are the ones that we actually need. So we're going to go ahead and let it sew this one out. Okay, it's going to move. We're going to trim this. And we'll let it sew this one out. So yeah, there's no reason to put those in. And they're not hard to take out, but why put them there if we don't need them? And hit finish, do one more trim, and then I can go and cut all my thread tails. And now I'm just ready to rehoop it and do the next one. So I'm going to do one more iteration. I'm not going to finish this. I mean, this is massive, this quilt sandwich that they made me today. I'm like, you think I'm going to like film all this and doing this entire thing? But anyway, I'm going to do one more iteration, and then we'll like talk a little bit at the end before I finish. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just hoop this up and do the next one. All right, so we're back over here. I've got it rehooped. We're just gonna scan the picture in and hit edit here. And we're gonna go back to scan the image, scan hoop, and let it go ahead and do its thing here for my final hooping here. I see once again, I forgot to pull my thread tail out. You will do that many times, I'm sure. All right, I'm just gonna fast forward through it scanning because it takes forever. Okay, so we're ready. Once again, I've got thread tail marks all over the place, yeah, so that's not ideal. My own fault for forgetting to take that out of there. So what we're gonna do is, once again, we're gonna go and place our placement marks relative to each other, right there. And remember, we're checking for rotation, really, not placement here. Here we can see that we are way off from where that one is, so we're definitely gonna need to rotate it a bit. So let's see what we get with that. Something like that, and what do we got over here? Pretty good. So that's a decent rotation for it, I think. That was, you know, a couple of degrees. That's significant. That would make a huge difference after like 1 or 2 iterations. Like that would be overlapping in here. And so I like to do this with the scan. Even though the scan takes so long, it's worth it because I can see where my stitches are going to end up. I can see whether my rotation has gotten so far off that I'm going to run into the previous stitches, and that would look terrible if that happened. And if you don't scan it, you don't get that visual. So I think it's worth doing, even though technically you don't need to. You can use the laser to check the corners for placement and everything, but you don't get that visual where you can see whether you're going to run into something. So I would, even though, you know, the scanning takes a while, it's worth it to do it. Anyway, so we're going to go and place our start point, and it's going to be ready to do the next iteration. So we go there, we go there, we get it dead on where the stop point was, and this is ready to rock and roll. So this is going to be my last iteration. Then I'm going to bring this back over to the cutting table. We'll have some closing thoughts here, okay? But this wouldn't be hard to go and finish the whole thing. It's just, you know, it's time consuming. So I'm gonna finish on this iteration, and let's go ahead and do it. So we hit the green button, we say yeah, we bring my bobbin thread to the top, just like that, okay, and hit the gas, off it goes. My start point is positioned exactly in the right place, as always. Cut my threads here, and off we go. All right, and so I'm gonna let this run out, and then I'm gonna see you at the cutting table over there, okay? Okay, now if you're smart, then as you're going along on the backside, you'll be trimming the bobbin thread, which I didn't do, so I have to go back here and trim all these long bobbin threads. But it's not a big deal. I mean, they're just threads, and you just trim them, and they're not a big deal. Now, all those little guide marks, once you're done with them, they will pull right out. They're not tied in at all, so you don't even need a seam ripper to get rid of them. They just pull right out. So I wouldn't worry too much about having those all over the place. Now, what is the point of doing this way, of having the quilting mode on the machine? Why is that such a big deal? Well, if you've ever done embroidery on a quilt before with a design that is made to be sewn on an embroidery design, you know that what you get on the back does not look like a design that was done on a long arm. It has weird knots in it where the tie-ins and tie-outs are, because an embroidery tie-out is different than a quilting tie-out. It's just a big difference in how the back looks in particular. And also a lot of designs that are quilting embroidery designs, instead of just being a single run, they'll be kind of like a triple run, like a bean stitch or something like that. You just don't get that with the long arm designs, which is really awesome. So yeah, so this is my top, and you can see how my second iteration here is lining up really well with my first. Okay, let me make it so you can see it. And you know, this is not hard to do. Once you understand the general principles, it's very easy to do this. I think you could do this on you know, just about any quilt and make a really, really good looking design. And any mistakes that you make are not going to be even as visible as they are on mine, because mine is a solid color with, you know, contrasting color stitching, which generally speaking isn't how quilts work. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a long arm, or you've got a project that's small that you don't want to set up your long arm for, this is just fantastic. I mean, it looks just like it was done on a long arm. The front and the back look great. These knots here, these are just these, and these pull out so easy. So here, I'm just going to actually trim it, and they'll just pull right out. See that? Trim this one, and it just pulls right out like it was never even there. Look at that. So all I need to do is do that for those marks. Now, I think it's worth doing those marks rather than just relying on the camera to eyeball placement, because when you're looking at like your first position here, it's like, okay, do I have it rotated right or not? It's hard to tell when you're looking at this, because you don't get like a straight line underneath of that. So even though, you know, it's annoying having to pull out those tie-outs, and it's annoying having to take the time to scan it, I think it's worth doing both things just to have that little extra visual confirmation. And also, you know, it's not hard. It's not a big deal to take them out. So anyway, so I'm sure that other people are going to come up with other ways to do this. This is a way that works, and you know, I just kind of been playing around with the machine. Really loving the 990. It is absolutely fantastic. And you know, we're hoping to get our first one for one of our customers who pre-ordered in any day now. That's going to be great. Remember, when you buy a sewing machine from us, we give you unlimited one-on-one instruction for life on how to use it. We give you 5 years free service, and we also give you a lifetime 10% discount on thread, notions, fabric, and accessories. But with the 990, we also give you a 1-year, what we call Platinum Preferred Customer Plan. That is good for a 25% discount on accessories, presser feet, notions, not just Bernina stuff, everything in the store. You get a 1-year 25% discount on everything. It's like it's so fair every single day when you buy a top of the line machine from us. So that is what we're doing for the 990. Don't forget. And if you are watching this before August 6th, 2024, make sure you sign up and come to our Bernina Roadshow event. That is at 1 to 4 p.m. Mary Beck from Bernina is going to be here in the store doing a live demonstration on all the great stuff that the 990 does. It's free. We're going to give you refreshments. There'll be lots of chocolate and great deals and stuff. So make sure you do that if you're not already signed up, if you live around here. So anyway, that is it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.